Hello, sir. I posted a link if anyone wants to join. As always, we're always happy to have people over. One moment, please. Sorry. Okay, so Ben, we had a little hiatus.
We did.
We had a little hiatus because. So tell us, how was your move? How's Austin? How's the new home?
It's still going. It's all still going. So yeah, I'm using a combination of cardboard boxes and random chairs to figure out what to eat and to do other things.
I
But
see.
that's the state I'm in.
Okay, did you meet any of the neighbors yet?
I met one neighbor.
All right.
It was very nice.
Is it a shachen tov or a shachen ra? Is it a good neighbor or yet to be seen?
Yet to be seen, probably. Yeah, not didn't meet him too much. I did go to I did go at Friday night dinner at the Chabad place. So I met a few people there as well. So that was nice.
Very nice. There's a local Chabad. Well, there's a local Chabad everywhere. So I guess
Yep.
there's a local Chabad there as well. All right, Richard, you doing well? Glad to hear.
Okay, I
All
have
right.
the things.
And you're adding the screen?
Yep.
All right. So, where were we?
So, sorry.
Second. Just going to make this a little larger. Okay.
Yeah,
I think we were in Mishnah Zion, number 7, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. And last, you mind scrolling up to the last one we just read beforehand? Number 6. Right, we saw Hillel, and he saw the skull hanging inside the water. Okay, great. I'm with you. So let's scroll down and let's take it away. Hu haya omer. We're still talking about Hillel over here. Talking about marbe basar, marbe rima, marbe nechasim, marbe deaga, marbe nashim, marbe kshafim, marbe shfachot, marbe zima, marbe avadim, marbe gezel, marbe Torah, marbe chaim, marbe yeshiva, marbe chokhmah, marbe etza, marbe tvuna, marbe tzedakah, marbe shalom, קנה שם טוב, קנה לעצמו, קנה לו דברי תורה, קנה לו לחיי עולם הבא. So let's just go through this once quickly and then we'll break it down. He would also say, one who increases flesh increases worms. One who increases possessions increases worry. One who increases wives increases witchcraft. One who increases maidservants increases promiscuity. One who increases manservants increases thievery. One who increases Torah increases life. One who increases study increases wisdom. One who increases counsel increases understanding. One who increases charity increases peace. One who acquires a good name acquired it for himself. One who acquires the worlds of Torah has acquired life in the world to come. All right. So first off, if you look, there's like a list basically of 10 items over here.
Mm-hmm.
Minus the last one. I think the last one is also talking about Torah as well. So it's just like a repeat. But in general, like we spoke about earlier, how there are three is a key number, 3 pillars that the world is standing on top on. And then we had different versions of that. 10 itself is also a major number, right? We have the 10 commandments and we have the 10 utterances that the world was created. So here there's another example of 10, which are supposed to symbolize 5 being more earthly and 5 being more heavenly, basically, and sort of connecting in that way to how we're looking about certain things. So we say with one who increases flesh increases worms. So this is really the only benefit from increasing flesh, meaning like eating gluttony, eating a tremendous amount, or being super focused on the bodily elements So the Mishnah here lets you know that ultimately, at the end of the day, when you die, right, the only thing that you're going to increase is the worms eating your body. If there's
Right.
more of it, then there's more of them to eat. There's a famous picture of was it Sheldon Adelson that passed away, and this was during COVID. So put aside where he is politically, just the fact that he was giving a tremendous amount of like charity, and he was like a big mover and shaker and had a tremendous amount of money. At the end of the day, the picture of his cemetery, it's just his wife. No one could come because it was COVID. It's just him, his wife, and like two other random people. And like that is at the end of the day, the whole Shadel Adelson empire is his wife standing over his grave. So it tells you, not to uh, 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 not to focus on these bodily things. I'm just looking at a sentence, a comment over here from Dan Smith. Question: is there a particular reason why the format was changed from the one with shorter sentences and more broken down discussion to the commentary on the verses? Again, the format was changed from the one with shorter sentences and more broken down discussion and the commentary on the verses. I still think we're there. This just happens to be a breakdown of just like general items that one needs to take into consideration. So it's lists. Later on, we're going to get to lists that are said by certain students. So it's just all the comments they had, or famous comments that they had. Last time was more broken up ideas, sort of woven together. Here you really have certain specific statements. I hope that answers your question, Dan. Okay, now we go to Marbeh Nechasim, Marbeh Daga, right? So if you increase possessions, you increase worry. So whether you're doing this to show off or whether you're doing this because you believe that you need all these things, ultimately, you just increase worry to yourself. So even if you're showing off, and if you're doing this to sort of reach some sort of achievement of like I now have a yacht or like I now have a plane, who says you're even going to be around that long to benefit from those things, right? So like regardless, this all you end up doing is increase worry. Just like a live example from this, and I'm very blessed, so I'm not complaining. But I, my in-laws have a pool up north, and when I constructed this house for them, it was great. I just came back from a small little vacation. My kids are on vacation. I was there chaperoning them. And I have to make sure the heat pump's working, and there was an issue, so I had to call the service, and I had to go back and change the water, and I did the wrong sequence. So obviously these are little worries, but ultimately not having a pool means I don't have to worry about any of these things.
Mhm.
So these are things that one has to take into consideration, right? That the second you get that new Mac, right, now you have to get all those new cables and all those new things that connect to it. So these are things that you need to take into consideration.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was just thinking about it also in terms of connected to the move that I made of like the trade-offs between living in a bigger place outside the city versus living in the city. Like when I lived in the city, I didn't need to worry about a laundry machine. I didn't need to worry about a car. I didn't need to worry like all those things where it was either I could just use whatever the infrastructure of the city to do that, and that was easier. But now all those components I need to manage them in various ways. So
And of course, in general, like while you could say like if I have all these things right now, these are so many more avenues and tools where I can do good in the world. On the flip side, these are all taking you away from a Torah study, family making, focusing on the most important things. So obviously, to balance, one always has to weigh. Okay. Our next line over here is one who increases wives increases witchcraft. So obviously that is sort of a controversial. So there's different ways of looking at this. So first off, as far as witchcraft, there's some interpretations which are in the Bible. The witchcraft we are exposed to are usually male. We have the Khartoumim, the witchcraft, the sages or the mages, sorry, in Egypt. We have Bilam. who's a prophet, but let's say he's using some sort of powers over there. We have we do have the witch of Endor, who the necromancer. So some people say that even though we see a lot of male witchcraft sort of happening in the Bible, predominantly it was women, and that's why we're using and that's why the terminology used in the Bible is machshafa lo techayun, right? And machshafa is about a female and not male. However, there's another interpretation over there by Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, who says that machshafa is just plural of many witches, just like daga is plural for many fish, and not necessarily that it was like a female. Now, another element to think of is witchcraft, or the reason we're putting women involved in this is if you have many wives, you're going to start causing sort of like infighting, and generally speaking, men resolve conflict violently, and women resolve conflict sort of behind the scenes with their own versions of, let's say, bad naming someone or defamation of such a sort. So you have many wives, which are going to start causing, and definitely at the time that this is written, you're going to start causing a lot of jealousies. Now, they're not going to blow up right in front of you. It's going to be backstabbing. It's going to be love potions. And just in general, what would seem to us as witchcraft is like, I know that Susan was really mad at Becky, and next thing I know, Becky has like stomach pains, and I must have cast a spell on her, or something shady happened behind the scenes. Generally speaking, there's sort of a lot of behind the scenes work over here, contextually associated with women, which in history sometimes was seen as witchcraft, right? Like, I don't know how these things are happening, but behind the scenes, these things are going on. So there's that level of interpretation. There's another level of interpretation, which is the woman is dealing with witchcraft, which is sort of like it's on sort of the lower end of things that one should be focusing on. If there's like the divine, there's a holy, there's witchcraft. And the reason is, and I understand this is controversial, and not that this is my opinion, just this is what I've heard in the past with regards to the explanations of such lines, is that generally speaking, a woman is always on the receiving end. And she's on a lower level because of that. However, when a woman gives birth, like when Eve blesses the fact that she had a son, and Adam doesn't do that, is because then she gets upgraded. She shifts to giver, to life giver. And when she's at life giver, she's at a better position. And that's what we say, the joyful mother of children. Emma banim smecha, once she's a mother. But when she's still a daughter, her father decides who she gets married to. And in this case, the example was that also that she would be more prone to using witchcraft because of that. But again, this is, women are amazing, rah women. My mom's a woman, my wife's a woman. Are they
friends? Yeah.
women?
I had something, I forgot it now.
About witchcraft and women?
Oh yeah, something about. Well, it was interesting to me, but I couldn't figure. I think I was trying to look for it, but when it was talking about Bilam, and maybe I heard this in a commentary somewhere. So let me know if this sounds familiar to you. But there was something about. I mean, first of all, there's the king. I forgot the people. He's asking for. He wants to fight the Israelites with their own power, with the power of speech, right?
Yeah.
The prayer.
Balak.
Yeah, but he wants to fight the Israelis with speech. So there seems to be something with shafim, with witchcraft and speech and speaking, and like you spoke about, kind of like thinking about the ways that different, like the men and women would, the tools that they use,
right,
to do things. So there's something about speech with that.
Fists and words. Well, there's just I'll answer. So I'll comment about something you said and then answer Dan.
Yeah.
That the famous words of magicians in Hollywood, or in when it plays is abracadabra, right? And abracadabra is in Aramaic, evra kadabra. I will create, like bria, like creation, kadabra, like I speak, which is the power of words, right? The words I say, the spell I say, the incantation I say, the sequence I say will follow with a creation of some sort. Dan is asking over here, there's a difference between witches and sorcerers, and the Bible says that the witch should be put to death. So he's right. Machshafa lo techayun. And that's why also, in theory, when the necromancer gets very nervous when she sees Saul, because she knows that, she was in hiding basically. But he promised her that no harm will come to her. Bilam is really in a different category because he's a prophet, and that's sort of happening with God's sort of seal of approval to a certain extent. We won't get too deep, go down this line of who Bilam was, because he's also in the Torah, the sages compare him to like the Gentile version of Moses. So he was a very, very powerful sorcerer as well. Very, very fascinating character.
Let me just mention, Richard, it would be helpful if you put the comments in the YouTube so people can see and know what we're referencing if you're putting questions.
I don't see any comments from Richard.
Right, it's in the private chat. So.
What is the message here? How does increasing the Torah encourage not increasing the flesh or not increasing possessions or wives? What is the principle at play here? Okay, good question. This is really how are we keeping away from an evil inclination? How are we keeping away? How are we making sure we're staying on the straight and narrow path? So this is all in general sort of that. The teachings of our sages are, there's obviously the general focus of one should learn and one should do good deeds, but there's the whole infrastructure around that. And you could also see it just in the last three things we read right now, which starts with, okay, in order to survive, you're going to have to start eating, right? So, because if you want to start the conversation, you need some food in your belly. So off the bat, let's not make that too intense and be increasing flesh. Now, once you've already managed to maintain and get on your feet and eat, you're going to have some sort of job, right? And that job is to increase possessions or get possessions. So here too, you have a job, that's great, but don't be going crazy about the amount of possessions you have. And once you've secured food and secured a job, the next move is obviously to marry, right? So here we have, don't marry too many women. And this also is obviously something that King Solomon fails at. While he was trying to do so for political reasons, he married famously the daughter of a pharaoh, but she brought into the temple idol worship, which Solomon, with his great wisdom, was really looking at it from a universal perspective and was not worried by that. His attitude was like, okay, this is just like low-level monotheism, and I'm just doing high-level monotheism, and it will all work out. Unfortunately, at that time, we were still not there, and he got into trouble for that. Okay.
It's interesting because this also mirrors kind of like these first three that you just mentioned, reminded me of like the Rambam, where he said, the Maimonides saying about, at first, like before you marry, like you want to have, I think like you want to have a good job, have a place to live, and then get a wife. That's kind of like which is.
Otherwise, you're creating just a scenario where now there's two poor people.
Right. Yeah. Right? But yeah,
so
that as well.
Want us to take that into consideration for sure. Okay.
So can I ask a question?
Of course.
Is this then study of the Torah is counseling moderation in all things? Is that
the study of the Torah in moderation?
Well, no. Is the study of the Torah, is it counseling moderation in the pursuits of worldly goods, like food, like possessions?
Yes. So generally speaking, and that also Maimonides really much believes like in finding like the middle ground. Everything should be done in moderation, even like extreme kindness could be problematic as well. So yes.
Right. And I think you can see that also from like, if you're abstaining from wine, if you
take the Nazirite vow, you ultimately have to, at the end of your period, whether it be a year, whether it be 30 days, you don't cut your hair, you don't drink wine, You don't touch. You don't get close to anything that has to do with death or unholiness. But after that period, you have to bring a repentant sacrifice to the temple, because at the end of the day, while you've reached like this high level of righteousness and you've purified yourself, you forbade yourself some stuff that God gave you, and that itself is something that you need to be atoning for. That was a very good point, Ben. Thank you.
I should have you finish my speech. I should have you just around to finish. Like every time I have a reference. So there's this thing I can't remember exactly, and then Chezi will pull in.
It's just because we're simpatico right now. It's just because it's Richard brings it out in us. Marbeh shifchot, marbeh zima. Okay, so we said, what was this in English? One who increases maid servants increases promiscuity. So first of all, off the bat, quite clear what's happening over there. You're really creating a bad environment where there's not much work getting done. Also, well, let's put this into context. Generally speaking, you're a Jew and you're wealthy, so you aside from the kids, so you also need like a maidservant. If you have multiple maidservants, usually it's redundant. You're not a king. You don't have like massive lands. And also at the time, just as an example, with regards to Hanukkah, there's a question of if you're living on like a 2-story building, can you have the Hanukkah lights or your menorah that is being shown to the public? Can it be on the 2nd floor? And at the time, they're having a discussion in the Talmud period. They're saying the 2nd floor, people are not used to looking up, because usually most people don't live in buildings. So it's not permitted, because your eye loses control at that point. You can't focus at that height. Today, when we have skyscrapers, right? So that's no longer the case. However, specifically on that item, the rabbis said that it basically, because there's other skyscrapers today. If you're on floor 40, there's someone else that's on floor 40, and it's as if you guys are both on ground zero again. So it sort of equalizes out. Either way, my point was that massive houses for the Israelites wasn't something that was very common. So having multiple maidservants is usually more of a status flex than something that's needed. And that's why you're going to end up having redundant work, or there's going to be a lot of people standing idly by, and women standing idly by that are maidservants that are not necessarily educated women, could just cause to promiscuity and cause many, many issues in that regard. So that's fairly clear. Marbeh avadim, marbeh gezel. However, if you have manservants, you are also sort of increasing the chances, the likelihood of things being stolen from you. Here too, on the male version over here, there's many men. There's more finger pointing and blaming going on. Oh, this wasn't my job. It was his job. He was supposed to take care of the back garden. There's a sense that no one could really track what's going on. And because of that, and no one could track. And 2, they're aware themselves that they're not all needed. This leaves sort of this mindset that there's overflow over here and I could steal. There's another issue over here, which is the mindset of the maidservant, or whether any of the maids or manservants living in the house. This is really a mindset of no responsibility, of no self-responsibility, really, which you sort of have with like teenagers, which we know how difficult teaching teenagers is. And it's because you're in an environment where, in theory, they're not little kids anymore, right? If they were hunting, they were out hunting already, gaining mammoth. Mm-hmm. At 13, you have your bar mitzvah, all the rules apply. So you have like these mini adults already, but we still treat them as children. And that's why it's very hard to sort of get them to play along. Unlike, let's say, if you're like dealing with 1st graders or 2nd graders, because they have no sense of self-responsibility. And then right after that, in Israel, at least at the age of 18, you're like, okay, now you could get a gun and you could join the army suddenly. So these are.
You're saying that having a lot of servants would lead to that, to an adult or to the owner being like that?
No, I'm saying having a lot of servants is great. Yes, it would be as in you'd be creating an environment where at that time, if you have a 13-year-old child that's not in school, he's working in the house. He's not on his Xbox.
Right.
But the people that are doing nothing, that are still sort of still under your roof, but are like these like mini like, you know, still acting like children, would be the slave mentality. Because, and specifically if there's many of them, because they realize, like, what are we doing over here? Really, we're not in charge from ourselves. It's not our own time. So it's just a bad culture to build inside your house.
Yeah.
Okay. What's up, Chad? It's good to see you. I'm glad you're here. You're welcome to join. And Sandy, it's good to see you as well. And Andrew. Okay, increases thievery. One who increases Torah. And now we're shifting from the 5 things that had to do with more bodily things, right? Taking care of my house, my food, my flesh. Now we're going to the more spiritual, divine elements. One who increases Torah increases life. One who increases study increases wisdom. One who increases counsel increases understanding. One who increases charity increases peace. One who acquires a good name acquired it for himself. One who acquires the words of Torah has acquired life in the world to come. So let's just break those down now. Okay, so the Torah, well, it's like, while you utilize some of your quote unquote living time, if there's this movie called Out of Time with Justin Timberlake. I don't know if you ever saw it, but basically it's all about the currency is time. If you're 1,000 years old and you give around time. So you could come and claim like, well, I'm learning Torah. I'm not like living, right? Like this isn't like YOLO because like I'm in the middle of studying. However, obviously this is biased. One would say that learning Torah is enriching the actual life you have, and in that way, it's like upgrading that life. So even if you spent, 10 minutes learning, it's really, quintupled in its life force. So you're really increasing your actual life.
Right.
Marbeh yeshiva, marbeh chokhmah. How did they say yeshiva over here?
Study.
Okay. So this is also in Hebrew, the word is yeshiva, is sitting down. And you could say this is happening in studying. The word would be wrong, would be like sitting to study. And the attitude is, if you are willing to take a pause of life, or the flow of life, which is constantly in motion, this is in a certain way also like a hint to what the philosophers were doing. The philosophers were more known as sort of like walking around, and as they walked around, their students would walk with them, and this study is sort of happening with them. Here, there's stop what you're doing, sit down, and take a pause of life in a certain sense, and to really take time and consider what you're learning as well. And this, in turn, will increase the benefit you have from that. But that specifically has to do with yeshiva. There are some people that say that if you increase your learning, or if you increase your yeshiva as in your study halls, that will also benefit you, as in not you personally sitting and learning, while that's also a prerequisite, rather that if you increase study halls. Okay, marbeh etzah, marbeh tfuna. Okay, so one who increases counsel increases in understanding. So here, also a few ways of looking at it. One is like, it's the greater person who asks for counsel, who knows how to reach out, who knows his limit. Alternatively, it's one who has spent a lot of time in accumulating different ideas, vantage points, and perspectives. He is the one who has this wisdom. More than just like this actual knowledge, he can now discern between different options and see how they're relevant for each case. So there's something about allowing yourself, and we spoke about this in earlier Mishnahs, allowing yourself to just soak in the wisdom from others around you, which then in turn allows you to really have a much better vantage point.
So I have a question here, because it's very interesting to me to think about always the differences between those things like chokhmah and tvuna. So here it's wisdom and understanding, but I'm curious, etzah, why does etzah lead to tvuna specifically? Is there something that you say something about differentiating? Because I'm also thinking about it from the Kabbalistic, about how they explain chokhmah, bina, dat. Is bina kind of equivalent to tvuna, or?
So let's not get confused also with like the terms over here in English that are translated, right? We have over here Marbe Shiva, Marbe Chochma. And here they have it, one who increases study, increases wisdom. And then we have Marbe Etzah, Marbe Tvuna. And usually we would look at Tvuna as, let's say, as wisdom. Okay. I would use Tvuna as wisdom. And here they have it as understanding. So I would say like the English interpretation would really need to be increases, one who increases study, increases knowledge, basically. Yeah. Okay. Right. And then one who increases counsel, increases wisdom.
Right. More.
Or in this case, understanding, which is like the knowledge you increase is because you sat down and you actually learned, right? But you could still be considered an Amma Aretz at that point, or like someone that is ignorant in a certain sense, as in while you know a lot of stuff, but because you didn't sit at the legs of your rabbis, you didn't have someone actually teaching you how to discern and understand these ideas, then there's only so far the knowledge is going to take you. But if you sat down and you managed to sit and learn, and while you were sitting and learning, you were also creating a space where you could accept and hear others, that is now giving you wisdom.
Right. Marbe Shiva. So Shiva is studying, is sitting down, but it's in some way it's passive. And then the counsel is something that's more active and is specific to you, right? You're asking for counsel or advice. So like you're digging even more into things.
Well, it could also be passive, like we learned with Siag leChochma Shtika, right? Like, a gateway to wisdom or to knowledge is silence, right? It's just being quiet and sort of hearing what's around you. And that is in a certain way like a passive action, so to speak. Beseder. Marbet Tzedakah, Marbet Shalom. So you increase charity, you increase peace. Now this is something that alludes a little to something that Richard said, which is like we're doing like this, like we're increasing over here constantly, and with charity, in theory, you have to increase charity. Unlike the other things, which you could be like, here's telling you if you anyways need to learn some Torah. If you learn a lot of Torah, there's benefits to it. Anyways, you should be sitting and studying. If you do much of that, you'll benefit. So these are all things that you're going to benefit from. However, from charity specifically, because charity is something that you have to do, even when you give charity, there's still the concept of like I'm being forced to do so. Like I'm being told to do so because part of my community. Going above and beyond sort of frees yourself from the God commandment of the charity. And now it allows you to do so from like your own accord, so to speak. So in charity, it's a little different. You sort of remove the alternative motives once you increase charity. Obviously, if you're doing so not for egotistical reasons, but rather because you want to be able to engage in this. Mm-hmm. Now, with regards to it creating more peace, this is actually a very practical implication, which is less poverty, less crime, more money for infrastructure, less delays, less issues. So this is just, as money flows into the proper systems, this could alleviate a lot of the ills we have today in the world. This reminds me of something from, I took my nephews to go watch The Flash, the new movie. And in The Flash, Batman, aka Bruce Wayne, is met with Wonder Woman, and she throws her lasso of truth is on his hand, and he starts just uncontrollably speaking the truth, and he says, if I really wanted to stop crime, I would just end poverty, basically, because he's like a billionaire. And that was, aside from it being, let's say, quote unquote, like a woke comment, so to speak, there's a lot to that, which is, in a certain way, if you took a step back and said, Batman, if you really, instead of fighting all these people, just, spent money on Gotham infrastructure, maybe that would be like the big difference you needed, instead of just like always finding a new criminal to fight. So, I don't know if Batman was thinking of Pirkei Avot at the time, but
maybe.
Okay. Last two lines in this Mishnah, Kana Shem Tov, Kana Le'atzmo, right? So if you're giving yourself a good name, you acquired it for yourself. Why here is it like acquired personally for yourself? Because this is really the only thing you could acquire for yourself and keep with you, so to speak. Because even your fancy cars and your fancy house even if you didn't increase and you just kept it with like the house in the city and the house up north, okay? Still, those are things that ultimately can end up going to your wife, to your kids, even for good reasons when you die. But the good name or the good reputation you build yourself, that is yours and yours alone.
Right. That's what's going to be on your tombstone. It's just going to be something about you and your name.
Hopefully. Then last we end with Kanalo Divrei Torah, Kanalo Chayei Olam Haba. So, and this relates back to the first thing we said about Marbet Torah, and we said when you increase Torah, you increase life. But that was sort of on a kind of practical level, which is like the wisdom that Torah gives you is enriching for your life. These are just, these are good concepts, but the same would be said about, Confucius. However, Kanalo Divrei Torah, you've purchased, you've acquired, you've immersed yourself in the words of Torah. Kanalo Chayei Olam Haba. You've immersed yourself and secured yourself life in the world to come, because ultimately the Torah, unlike let's say Confucius, is claiming to be eternal, claiming to be divine. So this is really the connection with the eternal life, so to speak, or the world to come. So they're just wrapping all that list up with, again, putting Torah specifically on a pedestal. One second, we have a comment here. Maybe it's similar to the idea of from my students, I learned the most. Nicole, yes. The more one gives counsel to others, the more he could increase the better depth of his knowledge. That is a great line, Dan, and I believe in the next couple Mishnahs, we will get to there as well. But kudos to you. Do you mind scrolling down, Ben?
Yep.
Okay. Short little cute Mishnah over here, number 8. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai קיבל מהלל ומשמאי. הוא היה אומר, אם למדת תורה הרבה, אל תחזיק טובה לעצמך, כי לכך נוצרת. Rabbi Yochanan, the son of Zakkai, received the tradition from Hillel and Shammai. He would say, if you learned much Torah, do not take credit for yourself. It is for this that you have been formed. Okay, so first off, just like something on the text over here, which is interesting, which is Rav Yochanan, we say, except Kibel, received from Hillel and Shammai. Usually we say it's from one or the other, not both, even though there were pairs. It's still, he accepted it from the pairs, or Kibel Mehem, accepted from them. And that was that's already later on when you have, when the two zugot, the two ideas is still, even though it's two different perspectives, it's still a general idea that you could accept from them. Mm-hmm. At the time of Hillel and Shammai and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai specifically, he was still accepting two specific different versions of traditions. And that's why he also mentions over here, if you've learned much Torah, because at his time, if you want to be holding, if you want to be up to speed, you need to be holding in two specific schools of thought, not just two different concepts, but ultimately they're still coming from the same school of thought. Rather, that there were two separate schools of thought, and you really had to be involved with a tremendous amount of study of Torah to be able to be aware of both of them. Right. Having said that, we are introduced to like a new character over here of Yochanan ben Zakkai. So he was a very important and prominent leader in Judaism at that time. He was a student of Hillel. His names are the candle of Israel and the right pillar of Israel. Very, very strong names.
Ner Israel, and what is that?
Amud, Ner Israel and Amud Israel. Amud Yamini.
Okay.
Amud Yamini. Yes, I believe so. He lived for many, many years, and he had many, many students. He was very involved with the macro and micro elements of the Torah, both like from the high end and like the small details, and was known to have a tremendous amount of just like general worldly knowledge. During the time of the temple, he had very serious debates with the Tzdokim, the Sadducees. even though that wasn't his personality, he was actually known as very kind. And the Talmud also mentions that stresses the fact that he would also, in the market, he would make sure to greet also the Gentiles as well, which at the time was like, less common. His famous story is the story of Yavne, right? So he was considered one of the more, during the infighting between the Jews, before the Romans destroyed the temple, there was the sakirin, the ones with the knives that wanted to burn the wheat storages, and then there were the ones that were a little more relaxed. Rabbi Yochanan was part of the more chill group, even though his brother-in-law was part of the more intense group, and he knows that it's over basically. And he with this like secret little escape, he manages to get out of Jerusalem, and he meets Especianus, who at the time is like a leading general. The story goes that they tell him through divine providence or divine knowledge or prophecy that he will become the next emperor. And right then he gets told from some other soldier that like the emperor just died. So he's like, okay, these guys are legit. And Rav Yochanan asks for, he has like a couple of requests, healing his brother-in-law, some other things. But the biggest thing was, Yavna v'chachamea, give me Yavne and give me her sages. Why this is
city of Yavne, yeah.
Why this is so big? Because he ultimately decided, he's like, listen, the temple's done, it's over. That whole version of Judaism, I'm calling it quits, and I'm going to create a whole new system right now in Yavne. So this was extremely, extremely dramatic, and it's difficult. I was talking about this with my brother, how we can't identify people like this anymore. People that have the recognition and the broad enough shoulders to come and say, like, I'm making big moves. And this would be like, this relates to, let's say, even the political status in Israel today and what the power grab that the rabbinate is trying to do. Like, who are the leaders to come in and be like, no, I don't want this, I want that. And the question is, maybe if that would be the wrong move, maybe at this time in Israel, even if it is a power grab, it makes more sense to be united than create a separation. Either way, his move, echoed for generations, and that sort of like created a whole new route for Judaism, so to speak. Okay. So now the things he actually says. So don't think too much of yourself if you studied a lot of Torah, because ultimately this is a prerequisite for all Israelites. Everyone needs to study much Torah all day, all night. So the fact that you studied a lot of Torah is basically you doing what you're supposed to do. You coming out and saying, like, look at me, how great I am. It's, sort of slow your roll, buddy. You're just doing what everyone else is supposed to be doing. Some of them don't manage to do so, but that's what you're supposed to be doing. Also, al tazik tova la'atzmecha. Don't think this is all coming from you, because you have to say that you have to recognize that it's all from God, ultimately, right? And the interpretation is that al tazik tova la'atzmecha. Don't, in Hebrew it comes out, it's translated this way: don't keep the Torah only for yourself, right. Rather make sure to teach and give on to others. As in, if you studied a lot of Torah, don't think you keep it all in. It has to go out. And also, the fact that it says ki lakach notzarta, and in English the terminology is for this is what you've been formed for. It's specifically you. Even though we just said a second ago that, like, listen, the prerequisite is for everyone to learn Torah, then like you're just like another cog. Having said that, it says because this is what you've been formed for. The Torah, unlike other things, is not just general wisdom, rather it's God's will. And God is telling you personally, Ben, Richard, Chezi, come interact with me through my will and your personal will. Anyone that is going to be studying the Torah is bringing his own unique personal soul understanding of what he's reading, and that is the unique relationship that he has with God as well. So this is also just stressing the fact that this is what you personally, Ben, Chezi, Richard, have been formed for, to build this unique relationship with me, God. Hala?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything on this, so let me just move.
All right, yeah, this is a short, cute one. Okay, next one. Chamisha Talmidim היו לרבן יוחנן בן זכאי, ואלו הן רבי אליעזר בן הורקנוס, רבי יהושע בן חנינא, ורבי יוסי הכהן, ורבי שמעון בן נתנאל, ורבי אליעזר בן ערך. הוא היה מונה שבחם. רבי אליעזר בן הורקנוס בור סוד שאינו מאבד טיפה. רבי יהושע בן חנניה אשרי יולדתו. רבי יוסי הכהן חסית. רבי שמעון בן נתנאל ירא חטא. ורבי אליעזר בן ערך כמעיין המתגבר. הוא היה אומר, אם היו כל חכמי ישראל בכף המאזניים, ואליעזר בן הורקנוס בכף השנייה, מכריע את כולם. אבא שאול אומר משמו, אם היו כל חכמי ישראל בכף מאזניים, ואליעזר בן הורקנוס אף עמהם, ואליעזר בן ערך בכף השנייה, מכריע את כולם. So let's just go up and read this in English, and we'll break this down. Rabbi Yochanan, the son of Zakkai, had 5 disciples. Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Hyrcanus, Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Hananiah, Rabbi Yosef the Kohen, Rabbi Yossi the Kohen, Rabbi Shimon ben son of Nathanael, and Rabbi Eliezer the son of Arach. He would recount their praises. Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Hyrcanus, is a cemented cistern that does not lose a drop. Rabbi Joshua, the son of Hananiah, fortunate is she who gives birth to him. Rabbi Yossi the Kohen, a chassid, a pious one. Rabbi Shimon, the son of Nathanael, fears sin. Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach is an ever-increasing wellspring. We'll stop there and we'll catch up as we go on. Okay, so first of all, this is something that Dan mentioned, which is Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai didn't only have 5 students. He had many more students. These are the heavy hitters, ultimately speaking, or more so, it's to come to show you that if you really wanted to know what Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai taught, you would really have to learn all the different versions of his main students, what they understand from him, and dovetailing on what Dan said, that this is really to show you that the rabbis are only as good as their students in a certain case. And like, unlike Socrates, right? Like Socrates says, like, my mother was a midwife, but I forget the exact terminology. They're basically like, I birthed this, like my mother birthed bodies, but I birthed souls to my students, basically, because I gave them like this wisdom. However, in Judaism, the students birth the teachers, right? Where a great sage is called a Talmid Chacham. He's the student of someone wise, basically. And here you're seeing how these students all together, in a certain way, represent Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, and the Torah that they learn is even in some ways surpassing his Torah, but it's coming from him, basically. So Dan was saying that, like, the more counsel you give, right, is to others, you really start learning better the depth of your own knowledge. There's a famous story of the Rav Kook gave his student, the Nazir, the famous Nazirite. He told him, take all my writings and put them together and let's publish. So he does all that, and he gave it to the rabbi to look at. And the rabbi was looking, and he says, like, I'm reintroducing myself to myself, basically. Like, now that I see that a student took my writings and formatted it and changed it around and created this order, now I'm learning more about myself and the things I taught. Okay, so Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus bor soch and no mebet tipa. It's this cemented cistern that doesn't lose a drop. He would remember all the Torah elements. He in the cistern, it says basically all water that you pour inside, nothing gets lost. It all stays remembered. He's very much, as an example, which we'll get into later, of like the traditionalist. And because of that, though, he's very much stuck in his ways. Right? Because he is this solid cistern that's not losing any water, he's very, very sure in his ways. And he's not going to be budging around or playing any games with anyone with that regard. Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananiah, Ashrei Yuladeto. So this is really like easy. Like every mother is happy that her son is born. So that's the great praise over here, is you have to read about who this person was, he was known as a polymath, which was like at the time, like, very uncommon to have someone that is just like fantastic in all different industries and ways of knowledge. And they say his mother would bring him to the study halls as a baby so he could really absorb as much Torah as he possibly can. Rav Yossi Kohen, Chassid. So a Chassid is someone that goes above and beyond. Here, the translation is pious. A short little comment over here, which is there are some that have identified Chassid, or the term Chassid, pious, as potentially people that were part of the Essenes group during the time of, a little before Jesus, basically part of the groups that were then identified with the people that were writing in the Qumran scrolls. So there's some alluding to that anytime it mentions Chassid, it meant something that was something that really went above and beyond the requirements of the Torah with that regard. Rabbi Shimon ben Netanel Yerechet. So he was very cautious of sin, obviously. Now, there's a simple way of understanding this, that he was fearful of sin, as in like, I'm nervous that if I sin, something bad's going to happen. However, at his level, the interpretation usually is that the fear of sin was one that he would constantly remember his sins and would fear them, right? So someone that is constantly thinking about how like this is, at any moment I could sin, so I just want to be aware of that and conscious of that, knowing his limitations. Others say that, and I think we mentioned that a few Mishnayot ago, a few classes ago, that his fear was the fear of letting someone down, which is sort of I know that if I'm going to sin, yes, there's bad consequences of that, but really my fear is letting God down at that regard. So that was his fear, or his level of connection to God and to the Torah, was he was had that close relationship with God where he wouldn't want to let him down in any way. Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach Ma'ayan Hamidgaber. So this is sort of like the wellspring, which is symbolic of innovation and creative thinking. However, this kind of thinking also could, if you get disconnected from the core, you could forget a lot of stuff. Now, this brings up the next line, which is sort of a question: which version is better? Is it the cemented cistern that loses no water, or is it the innovative thinking? So we have Rabbi Yochanan he continues to say, if all the sages of Israel were to be on one cup of the balance scale, and Eliezer, the son of Hyrcanus, were in the other, he would outweigh them all. Right? So we're saying, like, at the end of the day, it's all about knowing, being able to hold that storage power, that tremendous amount of gigabytes worth of Torah. That's what it's all about, and he outweighs all the rest. Mm-hmm. However, Abba Shaul said in his name, in the name of Rav Yochanan, so there's two different versions of what he said. If all the sages of Israel were to be on one cup of the balance scale, Eliezer the son of Hyrcanus included, and Eliezer the son of Arach were on the other, he would outweigh them all, right? So he says, like, no, it's not about the brain power with regards to the amount of storage. It's really about who's being more innovative. And this is a famous Talmud debate, which they use different. Here they use the term of the wellspring and the cemented cistern. In the Talmud, they use a different version, which is Sinai and Oker Harim. Sinai, and that's known as someone that has all the tradition from Sinai, which we would consider of Eliezer. However, Oker Harim means mountain mover, right? Someone who's innovative enough and creative enough where basically like reality shifts in front of him, like he could move mountains around. So this is like, what is more important? Obviously, you could say that if you are a mountain mover, you must also be a Sinai, because how can you be a mountain mover without all that information under you? And if you are a Sinai, how can you not be a mountain mover? Because if you have all that information, how can you not? That's a more of like a kumbaya attitude. Yeah. However, what I mentioned earlier about being creative and innovative, both have risks. Rav Eliezer could be too close-minded, and Rav Elazar could be too open-minded. And there's an example of this that when he became too open-minded, he came to read from the Torah scroll. He read the words wrong, basically, because like he was so far removed already from the core that he could no longer remember the source code, so to speak.
It's kind of like this. We spoke about like we say about things in moderation that implies a spectrum of, you can call it bias, of like you're either biased for more innovation or you're biased for kind of more like the conservative hold of like holding things as is. So that's kind of like probably, I would assume those two people are like you said, there's a kumbaya. Like if you know Sinai, you know that innovation is part of it, but still you're more leaning towards keeping things as is, let's say.
All right, I believe in Mishnah Yud Aleph, we pick up on that soon. So let's continue reading, and then we'll get there as well. I think we get back to this debate, so to speak, or we might. I'm not exactly sure. I don't exactly remember. We'll see as we go down. Okay, next verse. Amar lahem, Rabbi Yochanan. You mind scrolling down?
Yud,
yeah, 10. Amar lahem, tsuru ezuhi derech tova shidbak ba ha'adam. Rabbi Eliezer omer, ayin tova. Rabbi Yeshua omer, chaver tov. Rabbi Yossi omer, shachen tov. Rabbi Shimon omer, haro'eh et hanolad. Rabbi Eliezer omer, lev tov. אמר להם, רואה אני את דברי אליעזר בן ערך מדבריכם, שבכלל דבריו דבריכם. אמר להם, צורו איזוהי דרך רעה, שיתרחק ממנה האדם. רבי אליעזר אומר, עין רעה, רבי ישוע אומר, חבר טוב, רבי יוסי אומר, שכן רע, רבי שמעון אומר, הלווה ואינו משלם, אחד הלווה מן האדם, כלווה מן המקום. שנאמר, לווה רשע, ולא ישלם בצדיק חונן ונותן. רבי אליעזר אומר לב רע. אמר להם, רואה אני, one second, I skipped over here, רואה אני את דברי אלעזר בן ערך מדבריכם, שבכלל דבריו דבריכם. I believe I have mine in, one second, in my mission I believe it's split differently. And Hem Amru Shlosha Dvarim starts a different parak for me. Okay, so we'll finish this whole section, but we'll split it the way I have it written down on my thing. I see it.
Right. I'm not sure. We'll see how long it takes, but I might need to also go, so that might be a good place to
stop.
No Even problem. Though if there's more people can join as well.
Okay, so I'll try to do this free reign. Okay, so we want to see Tsuru, after we had this whole discussion of like studying a lot and learning a lot, the rabbi tells them, Tsuru, leave the study hall, go out and see. Okay, take some time to look at the actual world and see how practically are these good deeds. How do we get to these good deeds that are going to put us in the straight and narrow? Yeah. Right, so what's the basic, what do you guys think he's talking to his students, or we as the students today are looking and trying to decipher from them what are the basic elements we need, the basic fundamentals for this good life. So Rabbi Eliezer says ayin tova, a good eye. So we could look at this as being an optimist regarding people and all things, just having like an optimistic attitude. Some say look at this as ayin tova, as in seeing the good in everything, seeing the Torah in everything, in all elements. Maimonides interprets this as being okay with what you have, being content where you stand.
Sameach b'chelko.
Exactly, like a sameach b'chelko, be happy with what you have. Rabbi Yeshua omer chaver tov. Surround yourself, and we mentioned this earlier on in different versions. Surround yourself with people that will want the best for you and will push you towards like good deeds and a better life. Some interpret that chaver tov means you need to be the good friend. And that will force you then to behave in a certain manner.
Right.
Rav Yossi comes and says, shachen tov. It's the shachen, unlike the friend, which could be living in Sacramento, the shachen tov, the good neighbor, is creating a good environment in a good place. Also, unlike the good friend, the neighbor is a little further away, which is sometimes easier to accept his comments and words. Now, earlier we're saying have a good friend because he'll rub off on you, assumingly he'll also giving you good advice. But we all have those friends that they tell us something and there's like a built-in jealousy, or we don't want to be listening. There's something else, hearing it from your random neighbor, where it sometimes could go down a little more smoothly because like he's a little further back. Right. Also, with the neighbor, he's seeing you sort of walking around and he's seeing you from the periphery, and he's with a good friend, you could sort of let your guard down because you know he's going to judge you favorably. But with the neighbor, you got to keep up a good perception. So this too has to do with just putting yourself, the constraints you're building yourself, a good environment, people looking at you, you're going to be forced to act in a good way. Rav Shimon Omer, Ha'o'et hanolad. And how does he interpret this in English?
What is born out of one.
Okay. So this is really to, my dad would always tell us as children, have a plan C for your plan B, right? Have contingency plans, see what's coming up ahead, see what's on the horizon. That is where you're going to get real wisdom, basically what's coming downstream. And this is, again, removing you from the here and now, which goes back to like having a lot of properties or gaining a lot of money. Like don't be focusing on what's happening right now. Look to the future. See how the moves you have today, the butterfly effect they might have.
Right, second and third order effects.
Exactly. Second and third order effects. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Levtov, he says a good heart, because a good heart, so you can identify the other good out there. Like you need to know, like you have to have your own internal clock that's telling you what's good, and then you could start your journey. Some say Lev Tov means be patient. Like God is patient with us, you should be patient. Amar lahem. He says, I could see everything, all the things that you're saying really are what Eliezer ben Arach is saying, which is have a good heart. Because ultimately, that's where it starts. You need to first identify the good in you and recognize and identify that clearly. And then that will allow you to identify the neighbor, which is good, or the friend that is good, or have the optimistic outlook. But you first need to identify inside. So he's really saying the one thing he says covers all the other things you guys were saying up until now.
Right. That's one of the interpretations for V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, right? Like you love your neighbor as thyself. Like you need to love yourself. And once you do that, you can actually, you loving your neighbor actually has a value to it because you love yourself and you love your neighbor.
Dan asks a question over here. Does that mean that Yosef Prize may have been one of the essence? Yes, that may have been. There's some others. There's a lot of different interpretations over here. I believe, though, that what I am basing this off of what came out around the 70s or the 80s, and it could be that since then there's been literature that has refuted this, but this is what I recall. There's a book called Jesus the Pharisee. It's a small little book, and it's there. Just wanted to get back to that. All right. Okay, let's continue. Amar lahem tsuru. Again, go out and see. Ezo derech ra'ah shitachek min adam. Let's flip it on its head, right? Let's see, like now we identified the elements that we should be focused on for the good life. What is the things we should keep away from? So everyone basically, and this is sort of a repeat where they see their core, where Rabbi Eliezer says ayin ra'ah, right? It's a negative outlook, a pessimistic outlook. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Chavera, Rabbi Yossi Omer Shachenra, Rabbi Shimon Omer Haloveh ve'eno meshalem. Echad haloveh min ha'adam, kaloveh min ha'makom. Baruch hu, shene'emar, loveh rasha ve'lo yishalem, tzadik v'chonen v'noten. I want to focus on that for a second, because the other line was they all identify the bad friend, the bad neighbor, okay? What's interesting over here in English is, let's scroll down for a second.
Scroll down?
Yeah, just Rabbi Eliezer, as far as Rabbi Eliezer over here says. No, a little higher up.
You mean here, yeah.
Yeah.
To borrow and not repay.
Exactly. To borrow and not to repay, for one who borrows from man is as one who borrows from the Almighty. As it is stated, the wicked man borrows and does not repay, but the righteous one is benevolent and gives. Okay? Said Rabbi Eliezer, an evil heart, said he to them, I prefer the word of Eliezer, the son of Arach, on yours, for his words include all of yours. But just to focus on like this interesting interpretation of someone that's borrowing money. So this is, again, this is like the difference between someone taking a loan and their mindset. The wicked, and why he identifies it with the wicked and the evil. Someone who takes a loan and doesn't repay it is someone that is not thinking big picture, long term, not taking responsibility, feeling very cavalier with this kind of money. There was no game plan. And that's sort of how the wicked man looks at the world. The here and now, I'm not thinking about what's going to be in the world to come. I'm not thinking that bad things are going to happen, or one day, the Grim Reaper is going to come knocking. And rather, the one who looks at the bank and knows and returns his money, it's like he's having the relation with God and recognizing this is all from God, ultimately speaking, and everything that's being given to me is from Him. And one day I'm going to have to repay all these things that God gave me. And that mindset also allows him, like he says in Psalms, is the one that knows that this is all ultimately God's, feels a lot more open to give to others, basically. So that's why they're using this version over here of someone that really doesn't repay his debts, is someone that his whole outlook, his life is sort of skewed because he feels he could get away with these things.
Yeah, and it's interesting that that's juxtaposed because everything else is like Eliezer says in the first section, Rabbi Joshua says, Joshua says, a good friend, and then the second section it says a bad friend is a bad trait, right? And for Rabbi Shimon, the first section that he said about a positive trait is to see what is born out of one's actions. So this is supposed to be the opposite of that, borrowing and not repaying, or right?
Correct. Mm-hmm. And he then mentions, also mentions here too, Rav Eliezer Omer, he says, all the words of Eliezer ben Arach, I learned all these things from him as well, basically. Like, I didn't have to have all these things. I just had to have this one example of the donor to recognize that this person has a bad mindset from the get-go, basically. Yeah. We'll wrap up on this last Mishnah, which is a short one. Okay. So, Hamamru Shlosha Dvarim. Rabbi Eliezer, this is Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkus, would say three things. Okay, the honor of your fellow should be as precious to you as your own, and do not be easy to anger. Repent one day before your death. Warm yourself by the fire of the sages, but beware lest you get burned by its embers. For their bite is the bite of a fox, their sting is the sting of the scorpion, their hiss is the hiss of the serpent, and all their words are like fiery coals. Okay, so very dramatic. First of all, Rav Yochanan ben Hyrcanus, he came from a very rich family, but not very religiously inclined. They all worked the land. He was not great at this, and he really wanted to study. He goes studies when he's much older, in his late 20s, and he gets cut off by his family. Does a tremendous amount of learning. They see that the guy's a rock star, huge Torah scholar. Like we said, he's like this cistern that doesn't lose any water. And he has the famous story, which we mention often, Achnai's oven is around him. And in case Reacher doesn't know the story, there's a specific oven, and they're discussing in the study hall, how do you purify this oven, basically, kind of become unholy? What are the technical elements of this oven? And there's a disagreement, and the majority of the rabbis are going one way, and Rav Eliezer says the other. And they disagree, and he's like, guys, I'm Rav Eliezer, I'm the big dog. I'm telling you, I'm right. It doesn't matter. And he said, if I'm right, then the walls of the study hall will crumble, and they start crumbling. And if I'm right, this tree will be removed from its place and be shot across, and that happens. And the water in the stream will flow the other direction. Now, obviously, these are all symbolic of basically how strong his wisdom was, and showing how that like his interpretations of things are so correct that there's mastery over the elements themselves. Ultimately, the divine voice comes from heaven and says, the halacha, the law, is according to Rabbi Eliezer. Regardless, the majority of the rabbis come and say, Lo b'shamayim hi, right? The Torah is no longer in the heavens. The Torah was given to us, and we now have jurisdiction over this Torah. And because of this, they excommunicate Rabbi Eliezer. He gets pushed out. And there's also known that God, the continuation of that story is that God says that my sons have bested me, basically. Like, while originally I had this idea that Rabbi Eliezer was wrong, I'm happy of the fact that my sons feel such ownership on the Torah that I give them, and because they're doing so in their process, I will side with them, even though ultimately Rabbi Eliezer was right. But this relates back to him being sort of stubborn. Him being so sure he knows the tradition did not allow him, even though due to the law we go according to the majority, he couldn't get past the fact that he knew he was ultimately right in an ultimate sense. And at the end of his life, when the sages, one of his famous students was Rabbi Akiva, he didn't have many, but Rabbi Akiva, they all come to visit him before he dies. And when he's dying, he tells them, I am like a Torah scroll that is rolling clothes right now. Like, you guys didn't utilize me. I knew all this Torah. I had all this tradition in me, and because you guys excommunicated me, it's lost. And at that moment, Rabbi Akiva asks him like 3 different questions, like before he dies, to make sure he gets that info before he dies. But ultimately, you could see here that attitude of his got him in trouble. Okay, so these are the 3 things he says. So we're saying your friends, your honor, his respect, treat others like you want to be treated. This is again a different rendition of love thy neighbor as yourself, or you have to see yourself in the other. If you recognize, like we said, that Moses saw God's face, and then the continuation of that verse is like he saw the face of his fellow man, and to recognize that God's face is in you just like it is in your fellow man, and you have to be able to recognize that as well. You should obviously be slow to anger. Since you don't know which day ultimately you're going to die, really it's saying every day you should be repenting, right? It's being read as like you should repent in your last day. Ironically, like we just said with Eliezer, when he was dying, he did not repent, right? His attitude was like, I was right all along, but that wasn't repenting towards God. That was repenting towards the other sages. Either way, his attitude is like, you should always be in the mindset of repentance because you never know when you're going to die. And then we have this whole line about the sages, which you should be basically like warming yourself by their fire, right? But be very careful that you don't get burned by their ambers, by their coals. And this really means like by disrespecting them or offending them. However, we could also interpret this like you and I have read in the past, Ben, which is you need to be careful of what you're understanding from these rabbis and what words of wisdom you're taking from them, because if you misinterpret them or you misunderstand them, you could end up causing yourself a lot of danger and dismay. However, generally speaking, the interpretation over here is you need to be very careful with respecting them. And the reason is because whether it's the bite of the fox or the sting of the scorpion or the hiss of the serpent, these are all things that are seemingly small and start off small, but get worse as time goes on, right? The scorpion bite is small. Within a few hours, you're dead. The hiss of the snake, also same thing. It's a little. It sounds like the small little hiss, but ends up being very, very damaging. And the same thing with, I don't know if this is true scientifically, but apparently the snake of the bite of the fox, which I would mean is like, you get a little bite. I was bit by a dog, but the fox, unlike the dog, is out in the fields. Who knows where his mouth has been, and you could end up getting yourself like into a lot of trouble that way. So this ultimately has to do with, again, with the sages, which is like, you never know how this is going to, what the ricochet effect will be. But you should be aware that it's not good.
Right, an ember is also a very small thing.
Correct. An ember is a very small thing, and if you blow on it a little too much, you could reignite a whole fire, basically.
Right, yeah, embers, fires.
And all their words are like fiery coals, basically. So it lets you know sort of like you could decide how to look at that. The fiery coal could be a gold mine for someone that's looking for warmth right now. It could be detrimental for someone, obviously, if he starts blowing at it the wrong way, and you could set a forest fire.
Yeah, it's interesting because like coals are so like if you live in the field, so especially if we take the perspective of somebody who does not have does not have electricity, there's no power, like just from myself knowing to live, if you're camping or anything like that, to even have one coal that you can kind of reignite another fire and do something else with it, that's so important. So there's like something almost eternal in that one coal that you can kind of keep bringing more and more or reigniting more fires with it. So it's kind of a cool imagery.
I agree. On that note, I know you got a book.